Hey everyone, imagine finding a book that completely shifts your perspective on life, not by telling you to just be happy, but by showing you a scientific path to genuine, lasting well-being. That's exactly how I felt about Learn Optimism by Martin E.P. Seligman. I picked it up because I was curious about how some people seem to bounce back from anything, while others just get stuck. And this book delivers answers in spades, revealing powerful insights into our own minds and how we interact with the world around us. It's not just another self-help book, it's a deep dive into decades of psychological research, presented in a way that feels like you're having a fascinating conversation with a brilliant yet incredibly relatable scientist. So let's talk about what makes this book so profound. At its heart, Seligman, a renowned professor of psychology and a former president of the American Psychological Association, challenges one of the most ingrained ideas about human suffering, that it's purely a result of external events or deep-seated pathologies. Instead, he introduces us to a revolutionary concept called learned helplessness. Picture this: back in his early research days, Seligman and his colleagues were doing experiments with dogs. They'd expose some dogs to inescapable shocks. They couldn't do anything to stop them. Other dogs, however, could escape the shocks by, say, pushing a pedal with their nose. What happened next was astounding. When all these dogs were later put in a new situation where escaping a shock was easy, like jumping over a low barrier, the dogs who had previously experienced an inescapable shock just lay down and took it. They had learned that nothing they did mattered. It was a giving up reaction, a quitting response. This was a powerful, observable model of helplessness, and Seligman immediately saw its chilling parallel to human suffering. But here's the real game changer: Seligman realized that not everyone became helpless. Even among the dogs, some resisted. And that's where the idea of explanatory style comes in. This is essentially your habitual way of explaining to yourself why events happen, good or bad. It's the word in your heart, as he puts it. Seligman, and with his brilliant colleagues like John Teasdale, Lynn Abramson, and Judy Garber, developed this concept, expanding on Bernard Weiner's attribution theory. They identified three crucial dimensions to this style: permanence, pervasiveness, and personalization. Let's break those down, because they're really the keys to understanding yourself and others. Permanence is about time. Do you see bad events as something that will last a long time, like I'm all washed up pessimistic? Or do you see them as temporary, like I'm exhausted optimistic? For good events, it's the reverse. I'm always lucky is optimistic. It's my lucky day is pessimistic. This permanence dimension, Seligman explains, determines how long you stay helpless after a setback. Then there's pervasiveness, which is about space, whether the cause of a bad event affects just one area of your life or everything. If you fail a test and think, I'm stupid, universal, pessimistic, that's going to bleed into everything you do. But if you think, I didn't study enough for this test, specific, optimistic, you can move on in other areas. Optimists put their troubles into a small box, pessimists bleed all over everything. Finally, personalization is about who you blame. Do you blame yourself, internal, pessimistic, for bad events like I'm stupid, or external factors, optimistic, like you're stupid or I grew up in poverty? For good events, internal explanations, I'm talented, are optimistic, while external ones, a stroke of luck, are pessimistic. Interestingly, Seligman points out that personalization mainly affects your self-esteem, while permanence and pervasiveness control how long and widely you experience helplessness. So, here's a crucial question the book tackles: if optimism is so good, why is there such an epidemic of depression in our modern world, particularly among young people? Seligman argues it's not primarily biological. Our genes haven't changed that rapidly. He pinpoints forces like rampant individualism, where personal failure becomes almost inconceivable because it's all about I. He also talks about the erosion of the large we faith in God, nation, and extended family, which used to buffer individual failures. And perhaps most controversially, he critiques the self-esteem movement, which he believes mistakenly prioritizes feeling good over doing well. He argues that self-esteem is a meter that reads out the state of the system, not a cause of success. In fact, he cites research suggesting unwarrantably high self-esteem can even lead to violence. But the good news, the really hopeful side, is that Seligman's work didn't stop at diagnosing the problem. This entire field of positive psychology, which he championed during his presidency of the American Psychological Association, is dedicated to not just fixing what's wrong, but understanding and building what's right, and for that, we turn to cognitive therapy. Pioneered by Albert Ellis and Aaron T. Beck, cognitive therapy is all about changing your conscious thoughts. It operates on a simple yet profound principle: your emotions and actions don't directly follow adversity, they follow your beliefs about that adversity. The book lays out the model for change: adversity, belief, consequence, disputation, and energization. When something bad happens, adversity, you automatically form a belief about it, which leads to a consequence: how you feel and act. The key is the disputation. This is where you learn to argue with your own negative, pessimistic beliefs, treating them as if they came from a jealous coworker or a misguided student or your worst enemy. You ask, what's the evidence for this belief? Are there alternatives? What are the true implications? And is it even useful to dwell on this right now? When you successfully dispute a pessimistic belief, you experience energization. You shift from dejection and passivity to activity and good cheer. This isn't about positive thinking in a naive sense, but non-negative thinking rooted in accuracy. Seligman then takes us on a tour of how these principles play out in various aspects of life. Backed by compelling studies, in the workplace, for instance, he tells the incredible story of Robert Dahl, an insurance salesman for MetLife. MetLife had a huge turnover problem. They tried to predict success with traditional aptitude tests, but Seligman's team, led by Peter Schulman, demonstrated that optimism was the missing piece. Robert Dahl, who failed the standard industry test, was hired because he scored high on Seligman's optimism questionnaire. He went on to be a star salesman, not just because he was persistent, but because he was imaginative in finding customers. Optimistic agents, when facing rejection, which is daily in sales, tell themselves temporary, specific, and external reasons for the no. They were too busy, at caught during supper, rather than permanent, pervasive, personal ones: I'm no good, no one wants to buy from me. This keeps them making those crucial next calls. The book vividly illustrates that success at work isn't just about talent and desire. Optimism is the third crucial ingredient. The same pattern holds in sports. Seligman and his students caved caught and analyzed verbatim explanations the statements of baseball and basketball players, and even Olympic swimmers like Mathiani. They found that optimistic teams and individual athletes performed better, especially under pressure or after a loss. Think about the 1985 New York Mets optimistic versus the St. Louis Cardinals pessimistic. The Mets explained bad events as temporary and specific, while the Cardinals manager, Whitey Herzog, blamed general permanent factors. This kind of internal dialogue, Seligman argues, makes all the difference when the stakes are high. Perhaps most compelling are the sections on how Seligman shares the poignant story of Daniel, a 9-year-old with cancer whose hope was crushed when a specialist couldn't make it to Salt Lake City, and he subsequently died. This inspired Madelon Vizentainer, a nurse, to join Seligman's lab and conduct groundbreaking research. She showed that learned helplessness in rats could affect their immune system and even their ability to reject tumors. Optimists who resist helplessness are more likely to stick to health regimens, seek medical advice, and even have better functioning immune systems. The book even presents evidence from a longitudinal study of Harvard graduates that optimism at age 25 predicted better health at age 60. It proposes a plausible chain: bad events lead to helplessness, which leads to depression, which weakens the immune system, making disease more likely. Beyond the personal, Seligman ventures into psychophysiology, using his cave technique to analyze the explanatory styles of historical figures and even entire nations. With his student Harold Zillow, he analyzed the nomination acceptance speeches of U.S. presidential candidates from 1900 to 1984, successfully predicting who would win based on who was more optimistic and less ruminative. He even recounts his experience predicting the 1988 election for the New York Times, where their predictions for the primaries and Senate races were virtually perfect. The book also explores cultural differences in optimism, like a study on East versus West Berlin Olympic reporting, and even comparing the optimism embedded in Jewish versus Russian Orthodox religious texts. These studies suggest that the level of hope and despair can indeed be measured on a societal scale and has profound implications. Now you might be wondering, does this mean we should be blindly optimistic all the time? And what about responsibility? Seligman is very clear that he's not advocating for mindless devices like whistling a happy tune or avoiding responsibility. This is about flexible optimism. There are times and situations where a dose of pessimism, a keener sense of reality, is absolutely necessary. A pilot, for instance, needs to be mercilessly realistic about potential dangers. Someone deciding whether to drive home after drinking needs to be pessimistic about the potential implications. But if the cost of failure is low, like making a cold call or trying a new hobby, then optimism is the way to go. Pessimism, Seligman admits, can make us sadder but wiser. Depressed people often judge reality more accurately, while optimists tend to have a massive defense against reality. So, the goal isn't to become a naive Pollyanna, but to choose your explanatory style strategically, like a wise CEO balancing visionaries and realists in a company. Ultimately, Learn Optimism is a book about personal control. It's about recognizing that our internal dialogue, how we explain life's ups and downs to ourselves, profoundly shapes our experiences. It challenges the notion that character or genes are immutable, asserting that we can indeed learn to be optimistic and, in doing so, take charge of our emotional lives, improve our health, and achieve more than we thought possible. It's a call to action to consciously cultivate a skill that can protect us from depression, enhance our performance, and make life simply more pleasurable. It's a message of profound hope from a world-renowned scientist, encouraging us to recognize the insistent voice of pessimism for the vestige it is in modern life, and to choose a more empowered and fulfilling path. This book truly offers the tools to transform your life, one thought at a time.